Well, let's bring into this conversation economist and wealth advisor Jonathan Davis. Jonathan, good afternoon, sir.
Hi, Rob.
Welcome back to the show, Jonathan. Always good to have you on. The minimum wage is up. Is that good news?
Clearly, in the short term, if you're aged over 25, you're getting a practically 5% increase in your wage against official inflation of about 2.5%. So clearly, your income is rising above inflation. In the short term, yes, of course, that is good news.
Okay. But of course, today, the TV license fee is going up.
Indeed.
You've got to pay my salary somewhere, which is not very much. You've got water bills going up, vehicle tax rates, the prescription charges going up just in England, nowhere else, just in England.
Yeah. Isn't it funny that they raise all these other costs at the same time that they raise people's wages? You might think, oh, that's okay then, isn't it? But why are they raising all those costs? It's because we have underlying inflation in the system, globally as well as nationally. In fact, just this month, we're in the new month now, the public sector pay cap will end. So earnings in the public sector will be able to rise above 1% per annum from this year. So we have inflation underlying the system. You and I have talked about this for the last couple of years. What comes alongside inflation? Eventually, higher and higher interest rates. So on the one hand, they give you. On the other hand, they're going to take it away. Because inflation, Rob, your listeners need to get this, inflation is the biggest tax of all. But because it's not called a tax, we don't think about it. And because it's not something that directly comes from the government can pretend they don't create it. I assure you, governments create inflation. And that is why I say in the short term this is good, but in the medium to long term, people are going to have to watch out because the cost of borrowing is going to rise materially.
Okay, when you say materially, I mean, how much will it rise? It's been at record lows for such a long time.
Exactly. And that's the reason why there's inflation in the system, because our pound, our currency has been kept down lower than it should have been for such a long time. Across the pond in America, they've been raising interest rates for the last 3 years. We've hardly touched interest rates over the last 9 or 10 years. And yet you've seen the price of oil over double in the last 3 years, and lots of other things like copper and iron ore, from which we build buildings and transportation links, for example. So and food is going up in price. Have you been into a grocery store recently? So the Bank of England will be forced to raise interest rates sooner rather than later.
Hang on. The Bank of England is supposed to be independent. It is independent.
Yeah, it's supposed to be.
But you can't raise interest rates when we're still dealing with Brexit because we don't know what happens when we eventually leave the EU.
Yeah, Brexit's got nothing to do with inflation. Inflation comes from the global economy, the price of copper, the price of oil, salaries. So it's got nothing to do with Brexit at all. As I say, if and when the official rate of inflation gets above 3%, as I say, we're around about 2.5% already. When it gets above 3%, which is unlikely to be this year, but is likely to be next year, then the Bank of England will be forced to raise interest rates, to raise the price of sterling, which will help minimise the detrimental effect from the rising cost of imports into our economy.
Okay, hang on. Surely a government has control of interest rates and inflation, and when a government eventually takes this country out of the EU, they'll want to get more trade in. They'll lower interest rates. They will lower corporation taxes and make it really enticing for big business to come and work in the UK.
The United Kingdom is just about the most attractive country on the planet in which to do business. I respectfully say it's a total fallacy that the Brexit question is affecting business decisions. At some point, the Brexit question will be over. Businesses, particularly the businesses that you've just been referring to, they don't think in terms of months. They think in terms of years and indeed decades. So, Brexit is not the be-all and end-all that particularly the commentators in the BBC would have us believe. It doesn't have that much of an effect on the economy. As I say, the global economy has an effect on the UK economy. Global inflation, which is rising, will bring in higher inflation in the UK.
Okay.
You asked earlier, how high can interest rates rise? I'm telling you, if we are in sustained years of rising inflation, we will have years of rising interest rates.
Okay. They will, I take on board your comments, but they won't rise to anything like we had 20, 25 years ago. It won't be 16% again. It'll be 5%.
No, you're absolutely correct. But then again, in the 1970s, when our interest rates peaked, inflation in the mid-70s was an astonishing 25% per annum. Interest rates got up to nearly 18%. However, how much were you borrowing for a house in 1975? £30,000. How much are you borrowing for a house now? £300,000 in the south of England. So if interest rates rise, currently the base rate is 0.75. Okay. Mortgage rate is 2%. The mortgage rate even goes to 3%. That's a 50% rise in mortgage costs.
Jonathan, just as a byline here, because we might have a general election, who knows? Jeremy Corbyn says he's ready for a general election. What happens if John McDonnell becomes Chancellor of the Exchequer?
John McDonnell and John Corbyn are, admitted communists. Which means that they will aim and probably attain mass renationalizations of many of our industries.
That's good, isn't it?
We will rapidly move towards where we were in the 1970s, the sick man of Europe.
Jonathan, thank you. Jonathan Davis, economist and wealth advisor. Lots to get our teeth stuck into. Thank you to Jonathan, as always.